Welcome to Every Child Belongs, and what a joy today to welcome my friend Beth Guckenberger, who, gosh, I don't even know how long we've known each other. Probably 10 plus years, but I knew of you because I read your book, Reckless Faith, when I was all by myself in Ukraine adopting my 15-year-old daughter. And in reading that book, I felt like I had a friend who understood what I was going through and also pointed me to Jesus in the hard. So, Beth, I loved you and felt like you were my sister friend before you even knew who I was. And Beth has raised 11 kids. She's now soon to be the grandma of 6. She is the co-executive director of Back to Back with her husband, Todd. And Back to Back, cares for and advocates for vulnerable children literally around the world. And I want you to talk more about that. And one of the things that Back to Back did is you birthed another organization called Trauma Free World. And if you don't know about Trauma Free World, you need to look it up right now. I learned so much of what I learned about trauma-informed care came from Trauma Free World and Back to Back. So, Beth, you have influenced my family so much in so many ways. And also, one thing to know about Beth, extremely generous with her time, with her money, with her energy. And that shows through with Trauma Free World now. All of the online trainings are free. Mm-hmm. Beth, nobody does that.
Well, yeah, we so totally believe in the way it changes relationships. It's a gift to give it away as a gift. It makes my heart so full to think about people learning those skills, learning those tools, and then sharing them with others. I love it.
I mean, so thank you. And then Beth is also an author of, I don't even know how many books now. Is it like 11 or something?
I think we're at 16. It's about to come out.
Gosh.
So yeah.
You even had to think about it. Oh. And I have so many favorites, but you have a series called the Strong Heart series. And the first book was The Heart Who Wanted to Be Whole. I've given that to so many adoptive and foster families. It's a child's picture book, beautifully illustrated, gorgeous illustrations. And for kids who sometimes wonder if they're loved, this book it's really communicating the gospel to them and that they are loved. Or as Back to Back says, until every child is loved and known. Mm-hmm. And that's what the book does. So, Beth, tell us more about yourself. Hi, Beth.
You did a great job. I'm just a girl who loved orphans before I understood they came in families, and then I started to love their families, and then who didn't understand those families lived in communities, and then I began to love those communities, and then I realized those communities were set in developing countries, and that's how God grew my heart for the world. I didn't even, I think about in the very, very beginning what compelled me to do something was probably just James 1:27 about taking care of widows and orphans in their distress. Mm-hmm. But what has kept me in are particular names and faces. Like, I haven't really fallen in love with a cause. I have just fallen in love with a bunch of people. And those people, I can't imagine leaving. So the story has grown very much over the last 30 years. So my family has grown, our ministry has grown, the vision has grown. But even, I remember when Back to Back turned 25, I was being interviewed by somebody I wanted to impress, to be honest. And they said, I bet you couldn't have imagined the last 25 years. What do you see now that you know what God is capable of? What do you think is going to happen in the next 25 years? Where do you see Back to Back going? And everything in me wanted to say something that would make them kind of ooh and ah, like, you know what, we're going to be in 100 countries serving 1 million children with $1 billion. Just something jaw-dropping, but I just was feeling convicted as it was all forming in my mind. That's not actually vision. Vision isn't coming up with the biggest numbers in the room. Vision for me in the last 30 years has been just I'll listen to the Lord and I'll take the next step. And then I'll listen to the Lord and I'll take the next step. And then we're going to add it all up at the end and see where we went. But I I have dreams and ideas about what the next season holds, but the truth is, if God takes a right or left turn, if he disrupts those plans, I am just here for the ride in every sense. But you probably wanted more details.
No, but I think because of that, though, because of the way you operate, God blesses you in really unique ways and takes you to places that you could never have imagined because you're just standing there with open hands going, okay. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so someone was just commenting about our organization's value of generosity. And they're like, you just keep shoveling things out. I'm like, I know, but God has a bigger shovel than we do. And honestly, the more you give away what he's given you, the more you get given to steward. That's just a principle I can testify to. But I was 25 years old, 27 years ago when we did our very first adoption. And I had no idea if my body would work or not. I had no idea. I just knew that there was an adopted baby that was in my heart. and we ended up having a biological child born the same time as our infant adoption was occurring. So those two little people grew up like twins, even though they clearly were not. And that story started not just the big picture of what's happening with vulnerable children around the world, what's happening with orphaned children around the world, but just what happens to a child when he or she gets put into a family, and how does that change their entire trajectory? So not only do I want kids to be adopted, but, over the years I would realize how only a fraction of children end up with that storyline. The vast majority of fatherless children don't get adopted. So what are we doing about all of them? And how do we put family-based care around them or permanent senses of permanency around them? The rest of our adoptions ended up being adolescents, so children at age 12 and 15. And that put us in a kind of a unique little club of people with some good gallows humor. Anyone who's adopted an older child, we are a very unique club with some very funny stories. And that's probably between those children and the work we were doing with older children around the world, that's when we started to get curious about trauma. We worked in this field for more than a decade without understanding really the impact of trauma on brains, bodies, biology, behavior, all of that. And then when we finally got curious, it was like, oh my gosh, the best content is out there in academia. Like, somebody's going to have to go get some big degree because the best researchers, the best findings were happening in universities. But we needed that content at lay people's levels so we could give orphanage workers. And so just that whole journey of finding fancy people to help take fancy findings from science and distill them into bite-sized pieces for us to be able to put them in our faith lens and then disseminate that content. It was a game changer in my own family. It was a game changer in our ministry. And then as soon as we realized that, we just tried to give it away as much as possible. And we've been doing that ever since.
Yeah, and I have benefited, and the ministry team that I led benefited from trauma competent caregiver, right? Mm-hmm. From Back to Back that did exactly what you said, took all this fancy stuff and gave us enough of the science so that we could understand this isn't just a kid being belligerent,
right?
And then gave practical tools. So you said, I am also in the club of adopting adolescents. And I'll say, you gave me the best bit of advice once. Somebody had told me something that didn't make sense to me, and you said, are they in the club? I'm like, what do you mean? And not that we take information from all kinds of people.
Right.
But for people who haven't adopted an adolescent, it's hard to understand. You said when you started doing that, you realized how much you didn't know. So what are some things that you didn't know that you found out?
Well, the lightning bolt, the utter lightning bolt that I can remember what I was wearing, where I was sitting, the next conversation I had, the lightning bolt for me was to realize that brains could heal. And the whole idea of neuroplasticity and that what has happened to a child does not have to define them for the rest of their lives. And then when I realized, again, couched in all kinds of beautiful science, that the two fastest ways that brains heal is being heard, having an attuned listener, and play. When I realized listen and play were two of the fast tracks to healing. I'm like, okay, well, we can do this. We can train people to do this. And what could this mean to a child if they are played with well and they are listened to? And I'm already a hopeful person. That's just the way God wired me together. But in work like that we have, there's a lot of discouragement and there's a lot of just pain and hard. And so when you find a ray of hope in the midst of all that, you just hold on to it. And really, for any of your listeners, that's probably my favorite thing to testify to, is that I think there's hope in every single storyline. And I have had some doozers in my household with all the really terrible diagnoses you never want to hear. And anyway, we can talk about any of that, but that was the most exciting thing.
And I love play and listen. We make it so complicated. We see a kid that we don't understand who has behaviors that maybe frustrate us. And maybe the best thing to do is to sit down and play a game of Uno with them over a soft drink and just listen to them talk as you play. Is it really that easy?
It's really pretty that easy. As long as you don't care how Uno gets played. If you have one way to play Uno and they aren't playing that way, man, that's not very easy. But if you can play Uno the way they want to play Uno, because you realize the goal is not teaching them Uno, it's just about building a bridge between the two of you. And then what they're saying, as long as you don't need to correct what they're saying, or, of course there's some boundaries if they're talking about hurting themselves or someone else, but if they want to talk about something, like the goal in that moment of Uno and connection is volume. Like just get all the words out. Just keep them coming, because the thing that might be the moment for you that just okay, now I just got another piece of the puzzle, or I just got another insight into them, or I just got another, it might be word 700, and so who cares what words 1 to 699 are? Let them talk about whatever they want to, for the most part. And so, I think listen and play and get interested in what they're interested in. I do not have any personal interest in Latin American rap music, but I know all of those artists because I have a child that loves Latin American Spanish rap, and I would rather talk about almost anything else besides that. But if that's what I need to do to get to that word 700, bring it on. I would be happy to talk about that with you.
What do you think our biggest barrier is to getting to word 700? Because a lot of us don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, my particular children know how to push my buttons, and so they're protecting themselves in every way they know how. And one of the ways they try to protect themselves from being vulnerable is to try to push me away. And so if they can push my button and then I react to their button, then we've disrupted the conversation around word 250. And so I think one of the biggest barriers is just my own weaknesses and Achilles heels and sin natures and and so if I can have a good, healthy dialogue happening in my inner self, talking myself off the ledge, I'm doing what I got to do to stay in this right now, then we're all better for it. It's a lot of cleanup if I lose my cool, and takes a lot more than 700 words. So that's one of the biggest barriers. I think the other one's really probably way more practical, but that's our phones. Just any kind of distraction. You get a notification, suddenly they don't feel like they're that important to you. Even my notification is there's a storm coming or whatever. It's not even it's like another kid. Just some dumb ding on my phone pulls my attention away. It feels like that should be no big deal, but that's a pretty big message to your child that something else is just actually gonna divert myself from you. And so there's all kinds of things like that can derail it, but there's so much fruit from staying in the moment as long as I possibly can do it.
Yes. And you wrote a book. It's a devotional, Presence Matters.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're telling us.
Yeah.
Presence matters. And if you don't, I've recommended that to so many people. A church just ordered a bunch of them, gave them to all their kids and student volunteers. It's just simple, practical, trauma-informed principles, biblical principles. But yeah, there's nothing that beats just sitting with a kid and listening to them. And what you said, being interested in what they're interested in.
Yes. There was something, I'm a multitasker. I'm a high capacity achiever.
Yeah.
I'm all the things. When I realized that Jesus never moved faster than 3 miles an hour, I was like, oh, okay, so faster isn't actually better. Like, because I could pride myself, frankly, on being efficient or on, going through the drive-through and being on the phone and, whatever, all the things, all at the same time. Look how much I can get done. We have 0 examples of that biblically. There is nothing heroic about that. And so, Presence Matters came out of just my understanding of trauma and my desire to put it in story. I like to travel to Israel and study there, and there's an expression in the Holy Land that says teaching without a story is like a basket without a handle. You just can't pick it up. So I wanted to put some stories around some of these trauma principles so that people could start to see themselves in that and see practical ways in which you can help children understand predictability, what's coming next, or you can help them have what we call felt safety, or like words that maybe feel unfamiliar, how I could put them in a story so people could go, okay, I got it. I can do that.
And you are one of the best storytellers. I know. I've remembered so many of your stories, but then I also remember the biblical principle, the teaching, but you're right. It's the story that's the handles for it. So Beth, since you are such a good storyteller, there are a lot of people who aren't in proximity to families who are raising kids who've experienced trauma. And when they do kind of brush alongside of them, they are surprised. Sometimes they're appalled at our kids' behavior and about our behavior, the way we're responding. So tell us some stories that would help us better understand what families and these kids may be experiencing and how we can better support them, come alongside them, be a friend to them.
Yeah, Forbes just came out with an article last year or year and a half ago now that says we're 22 times more likely to remember something if it's been told to us in a story. So, yes, I'd love to tell stories. I think one of the first kind of mistakes, if we're going to use that kind of judgment award, that people know, that people make just out of ignorance, is that they ask questions about a child's history that they may not be comfortable answering. It can be everything from, how did you feel when you heard you were going to be adopted into this family, to did you ever get a chance to meet your mother, to whatever. People can ask all kinds of things. Some of them are just well-intentioned and simply curious, but they have no idea the landmines that they're walking through in that child's heart and mind. And I have a son that I adopted at 12, and I remember he entered into a 7th grade American junior high, and it was a school that was fed into at that level by a bunch of elementaries. And so I understand what this teacher was trying to do. She was hoping for a bunch of kids who didn't know each other to get to know each other in a classroom. But the very first week of his American school career, she assigned this legacy assignment where she asked them all to bring in a poster board and to put pictures of their childhood pets and their family vacations and their whatever pictures, so that they could introduce themselves to the class and teach the children, the other kids, about their histories. And my son came home just like, literally, I'm never going back there again. Like, I'm going to have to tell them all I was an orphan. Like, we don't even have any pictures. Like, he had only been home at that point for 2 months. And I remember telling him that all the relationships in our lives fall in one of 4 categories. They're either people in our house, which can know our stories. This is part of what a family is. We know each other's stories, and we hold them with great respect and hopefully, care. Then we have people that aren't in our house, but they're kind of in our metaphorical front porch. They're like the people we do life with, and we do share our stories with them typically, either because they celebrate them with us, or they hold us accountable in those stories, or they grieve with us in those stories. But those are like our people. And then we have folks that are in our yard. They don't need to know our stories. And then there's people out in the neighborhood. They definitely don't need to know our stories. And I said, "Where's your 7th grade classroom?" And he decided they were in the yard. And I said, "I think that's probably right. A couple of them will probably hopefully come up on your porch, but right now they're all in your yard. We don't need to tell them about your history. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to Google cute Hispanic baby. And we're going to print some pictures out, and we're going to make a killer book board of you. And I don't care what we say to them, but we're not putting one of those pictures in a frame for grandma because she's in the house and she knows your story. But I don't think we need to tell everyone the parts of your story that you're not ready to share yet." And I told the teacher we were doing it. I'm like, "You can fail us if you want. We should definitely get an A for creativity. It's been a lot of fun to put together this board." But I think for people who don't know any better, when they ask, like I have children that are adopted that are not biological siblings, but people always want to know, is that your real sister? Like mainly wanting to know, like, did you get adopted together? Do you have the same gene pool? But those words like real are very, they send a really loud message, even though they were totally innocently spoken. And I do give people a lot of benefit of the doubt because I don't think all they know is what they've seen in movies if they don't have these stories in their own lives. So I appreciate you giving a platform for people to share stories and just to educate folks on how to navigate. So I usually, my rule of thumb is I encourage the people in my children's lives, ask them anything about their present. Are you playing soccer? Do you like the latest Marvel movie? What's your favorite food? Ask them anything about their future. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And whatever. Just don't ask them about their past. If they choose to share that with you, you are in a very privileged category. That's one of the rules of thumb. I try to get ahead of my children, and I think that's true for any of us that have kids that might feel like they don't belong. If we can get ahead of them and try to educate the circumference, whether that's coaches or Sunday school teachers or youth group leaders or even the parents of their friends, if we can try to help give them some good ground rules, then we make the world a safer place for our kids.
I think that's a good rule just for interacting with any kid. Mm-hmm. Our youngest looks like us. She has the same coloring, but people don't know that. So asking her about her past can really stir up stuff that isn't helpful. So I think engaging with any kid, that should just be a new rule for us. We ask about what's happening right now or what's happening in the future. I want to go back to the dreaded adoptive and foster and kinship families. The Family Tree Project is the dreaded project, and I am so surprised that it's continuing to be assigned at school.
Yeah.
What is a good alternative for that?
I think, again, maybe even that rule of thumb, like maybe instead of a look back, you assign some project that gives kids a chance to dream about their future. Like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And where do you think you'll be going to school? And what kind of job do you think you'll have? And what kind of car do you think you'll drive? What kind of pet do you think you'll have? Like, we can all look ahead on equal footing. Looking back is really hard because, again, even for kids who don't have adoption in their story or whatever, maybe there's a divorce in their history or a really painful move in their history or something that, like, when they look back, they're just not equipped in that non-therapeutic setting to talk about. Certainly, kids need to look back and process their histories, but in very safe environments with very trusted and trained adults who can help them make sense of whatever it is that might be hard back there.
Right. Well, one question, I think that's a great idea. Teachers, let's do what's happening now and let's look to the future.
Yes.
Because seriously, every year at the beginning of the school, I talk to so many adoptive and foster parents saying, what do I do and why are we still doing this?
Why are we still doing this?
So I would get the question because my girls would sometimes have behaviors that were surprising to people. And they would say, I don't understand. They're in a loving family. They are in a safe little town. Why are they still acting like this? How would you respond to that, Beth?
I would first try to determine the sincerity of the person asking. If the reason the person's asking is because they truly want to understand, because they're going to be interacting with my child on a regular basis and they're trying to figure out why does that the reaction, or how can I help them through that reaction? That is a totally different response to me than someone at a grocery store or an airport or a sporting event or the mall or wherever who has a twinge of judgment in that request. I don't actually feel like I owe them anything. In fact, I remember when I was raising that first adoption I was talking about, and he and his sister are two different colors. And so, but I was a new mom. I put them in matching clothes. They were in a double stroller. People could get the vibe they were twins, but they weren't twins, and they would usually ask some kind of question if I was out with them alone, like, what's the dad look like? And in the very beginning, I thought like, okay, this is my teachable moment. Hey, everyone, let me tell you about the joys of international, multicultural, cross-cultural adoptions. But I realized, maybe they even cared. I don't even know if they cared. And two, what they heard one time, my son heard 500 times. So I want to have the kind of answer I want him to remember hearing me say 500 times. And so I decided to get almost flippant, I'd be like, wow, he's really good looking or whatever. Like as if that child and I had an inside joke, because that was very bonding for us to have funny answers to that. And we wouldn't dread that question because it was like a competition who could be funny about the answer or whatever. It was a very connecting thing for us eventually. And so to your question, if somebody asks me about one of my children's behaviors, if they're sincere, I want to give them more information because they can join the team of helping my child feel safe and through a difficult moment. If they're not on the team, then I don't actually care what they hear. I don't care. I don't care what their answer is. I don't care if I'm funny or sarcastic, or I just don't even respond at all. There are plenty of places if someone's genuinely interested for them to get information, webinars and books and podcasts and classes and courses. And if you really want to know, I will not be the only place that you can find out. And I may not right now be the place you find out anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's such freedom in realizing we don't have to answer. I remember being with another adopted mom and somebody asked me a question that was actually kind of hurtful. And I looked at this friend who's an adopted mom and she's just shaking her head no. And I'm like, I don't know what she's trying to tell me. And then she used her fingers to do the little walking signal. She was telling me, walk away.
Walk away.
Walk away. You don't need to answer this. That's such good. I think remembering that our kid is our primary audience.
100%.
It's so important. Even if our kid isn't there.
Yeah.
Because that story might come back to them, whatever we respond to. So Beth, even though you are well-trained, you have a ton of experience, you have raised a whole bunch of kids, I know that sometimes it is still hard for you.
Yes.
What things have people done for you that made you feel loved and known? Because hopefully that will stir up some ideas in us on how we might, because a lot of times what we do is we take a step away instead of a step toward, because we just don't know what to do.
Yeah, I am fluent in this content. And I had a moment, this is maybe 3 years ago, where I made one of those like 911 calls that people make to me. Like, tell me what to do right now. Here's the story. What is the magic bullet? And I had locked myself in. I had a rebellious, he would have been 18-year-old son in that moment. And I knew enough we were having a heated exchange, and I knew enough to walk away. I could feel myself getting sucked into it. And it's for me, when I start talking exactly like him to him, that's not a good sign. I need to continue to sound like an adult. When I start sounding like his peer, like that's the warning flashing signs. So I walked away, went into my room, called the president of Trauma Free World, who has a PhD in this, and said exactly what people said to me. Hey, here's the situation. What's the silver bullet? And of course she knows 1,000 tips and tricks and techniques and trainings. And she just goes, hey, breathe with me. Just breathe for a second. Breathe. And she's doing some breathing exercises with me. She's like, just sit down, close your eyes, feel the ground. Like she was literally co-regulating me, and to the point where I was suddenly like back in my right mind. My heart was not racing. I did not feel like all the adrenaline was lowering. And then my mind kicked back into action. And I think, I had this moment. I gave birth to my very first child ever in a foreign country. And I gave birth early. So my mom was supposed to come. When you have your first baby, your mom is supposed to be there.
Right.
And she wasn't there yet. And I remember calling her from the hospital like, what? You're not coming yet? Like, how am I supposed to do this by myself? I don't even know what I'm doing. I can't even understand these people. And she said to me very quietly, you are the world's foremost expert on Emma. There is nobody who knows more about her than you do. Emma was like 2 hours old. And she said, you know exactly what to do. You will be just fine. And the truth is, that's true for all of our children. Like I have a PhD in that 19-year-old son. I know everything. I know what pushes his buttons. I know what his trauma is. I know how to co-regulate him. There's nobody I can call in that moment that knows more about him than me. I am the world's foremost expert on him. I just let my own engine run too hot. I let my own fatigue, my own, all the things, my own shame, my own, all the things just escalate to where I was offline. My brain was completely offline. And just taking a moment to breathe and relax and realize, does this need solved right now? Does this need solved in my way? Does he need to think I'm amazing? Does he need to see things my way? Does he, all the things that I had been thinking, like, you got to do it my way. You have to understand I'm right. You have to understand you're wrong. You have to, that was where my mind had been headed. And like, oh, actually, that's not true. And once I calmed myself down, which is the best thing that little expert could have done for me, then I was able to get re-engaged in that story. And so I think, when I think about your listeners, if they can just get really good at taking their own temperature and seeing the warning signs flashing on their own dashboard, and if they can calm themselves down, great. If not, if they can have someone they can call who has been instructed that they don't need to give any advice, they just need to help them calm down. That's such a gift. That's such a gift.
It's also okay for us to make that, because I think a lot of people want to come up with something profound to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's okay for us to make that call and say, I'm drowning right now. You just need to help me.
Yeah.
Not feel like I'm drowning.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right. You've lost access to your thinking part of your brain. So you can't, it's really with you being the expert on him. It's much better for you to have access to your thinking part of the brain so you can be a part of coming up with the solution, even though your friend is super smart and experienced and has all the degrees, you're still the expert on that kid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if she had the magic bullet, she would be a billionaire. I mean,
right.
That would be, like, she might have a suggestion that I hadn't thought of before, but, man, I'm in no condition to receive that or even exercise that suggestion until I'm in a better spot myself. So, and I think the other thing that I would say to parents is, so we adopted 2 15-year-old girls that we met when they were 11. They entered our family off and on through foster care 11 to 15, and then 15, they were permanently ours, and they are today 38. And I remember when I adopted them thinking at 15, like, surely I could do anything for 3 years, right? You're done at 18. What I can testify to is, at 38, you're still in it. Like, you're still listening, you're still playing, you're still all the things. It's such a marathon. And usually when I was losing my cool with my kids, I was thinking to myself, this is not turning around fast enough, or this had better get itself figured out before X, before they go back to school, before they stay with grandma, before, well, I don't know. Like, I was putting some expectations on the speed with which healing needed to happen. But truthfully, this is a lifetime assignment. And if I could realize that on any given day, I could probably not lose my cool so fast.
Right. I keep wanting people to quit using the marble analogy with 18 years, as far as this is the amount of time you have with your kid, then at 18 years it's over. Because for me, once I realized, oh, wait, it's not over at 18 years, it helped me when they were younger. It's like, I'm not trying to just get them to 18.
Yeah.
I'm trying to have a long-term relationship with this human being. It's going to change and evolve over time, but I want to be in relationship with them. I'm not just training until they're 18.
Which honestly, Kim, is kind of an American idea. Like, the work that we do around the world. I don't hear a single Indian woman thinking that her child's allowed to be independent and think for themselves at 18, or African mom is thinking, after 18, I better not give them any counsel or advice, or Latino mom. I mean, these are people that are staying in their children's lives for the duration, and they see themselves as a very strong influence still long after they kind of cross out of that adolescence into adulthood. It's America that we think, think for yourself, make your own way, be independent. You're going to stop listening to me at that point. That's not biblical, and it's certainly not the way the rest of the world works.
So how do we change? Because you're right, that is a mindset in America. Mm-hmm. How do we change that mindset for ourselves personally?
Yeah, I think acknowledging it. I think acknowledging it to your child. Like, we feed 16, 17, and 18-year-olds language as we're trying to hurry up and make them responsible. And we set for them the expectation that frankly, in many modern households, we'll continue to pay for your lifestyle, but now you're in charge of your lifestyle. Well, that didn't make any sense. Yes, I'm not paying for all that lifestyle. Like, if I'm paying for that lifestyle, I got to say about that lifestyle.
Yes, I do.
We give a lot of, we use a lot of language and vocabulary that makes that 18-year-old feel like they're supposed to know everything and do everything. But I don't know if you've ever seen any of those funny videos of like the kinds of things that freshmen in college text their parents. There's like compilations of them, and they're still figuring out things. They do not know anything. I mean, they know what they know. I'm not minimizing what they have learned in life, but they do. They still need guidance, counsel, and so I think that's really important, especially because if we have children that have any kind of trauma history, their biological 18 birthday does not mean they are emotionally 18 years old, which I just made an argument is still not even that old. So if my biological 18-year-olds are emotionally more like 12, 13, 14, they definitely are not at a point where they can manage all of life's complications on their own. So we just need to keep strengthening that bond and realizing we're in a marathon.
Yes. I had a therapist once tell me with one of our girls that it takes 18 years in a stable, loving environment to really get all the stuffing you need inside to be able to start working towards independence. So that really helped us when she was 25 and we had expectations. It's like, wait a minute, she's only had 15 years.
Yeah.
She needs more time. Beth, I could sit here and talk to you all day. I want to ask one final thing, and then we're going to do some rapid fire.
Okay.
As I said at the beginning, I love that Back to Back says until every child is known and loved. Okay, we're not all going to bring kids into our family 24/7.
Right.
If we're not doing that, but we do desire for every kid to be known and loved, what do we do? What can we do? Give us some ideas.
Oh, I love that you're asking this question, because this is one of the changes I've seen 30 years in this industry. Once upon a time, the only people who had these stories, we told their stories, but we made them seem like heroes. Like, oh my gosh, they homeschool their 100 children and they bake their own bread and they're like amazing and they've sold everything they own and they live in other countries. And there were people like that, but the entry ramp was so steep. Just a select few people took it. Today, what I see is we are increasingly understanding that this is the responsibility of the everyman. We all need to have tools in our pocket because we're all going to be interacting with people who have trauma history. We all can do something. We are all called to love. We're all called to engage. So whether you decide to bring someone into your family, or you decide to be respite providers, or you decide to be coaches or mentors, or you decide to be, I mean, there's a lot of places you can, or meal providers or whatever. There are so many ways in which we can wrap around really hard stories. And so I mean, I'm so moved by the David and Goliath story these days, and how just the simplicity that David had been throwing stones for a long time. And so it made all the sense in the world that he would throw a stone in a moment when it mattered the most. Like, I would just say to your audience, what kind of stones are they throwing? If they're good at athletics, they should be a coach, and they should help out on teams where kids have trauma history, and may not understand how to handle defeat or take instruction or have very much resilience. If you're a really good cook, you should just make twice the food every day that you would normally need and deliver it every day to a family who would be blessed by it. Like, that's your stone. Like, you should just do whatever it is that you already know how to do, but do it for families and kids who are in these kinds of stories. But get trained. Get trained. I mean, can't say that enough.
Which you can get free training.
Free.
Trauma-free world. You can buy Beth's book, Presence Matters, which is bite-sized training with a story that helps you have a handle to hold on to it.
Yep.
Thank you, Beth. I'm so thankful that more people get to hear your voice. It's important. Okay, you ready for some quick questions?
Yes.
Most memorable gift from your childhood?
A swimming pool towel that had my name on it. Okay, just saying.
So, do you still have it?
I don't, but I did for a very long time. And it wasn't something that could break. It represented a million days of fun, and it felt like mine because it had my name on it.
Yes. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Hopeful. Extreme lover, like love people to the extreme. Jesus follower. I just love Jesus.
Beth, I affirm all those. Those 3 are you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If you could eat only one food, what would it be?
Ice cream. All those people with their like last supper, steak dinners. No, thank you. Just ice cream. It doesn't matter at that point.
You don't care what flavor, just ice cream.
I don't really care what flavor. I'm pretty indiscriminate. Ice cream.
Nice. Okay, good to know. So when you're having a bad day, I'll ship you up some ice cream.
Yes.
Okay, and this is the last one. Finish this thought. Every child
is worth it.
Yes, they are. And for us to show that, we might require change on our end.
Oh, yeah. I was just this last week, I was serving in one of our sites out of the country and interacting with a child that I have never met before, who I had been told a few headlines, but that child hadn't told me anything, so I didn't have any experience. And I just wanted to freeze time. I was sitting on the floor with him, and I thought, my gosh, I would give this whole day to be with you. Like, I just loved every second of it. And I think sometimes there's a misconception in this field that we can get worn out, burnt out, that it's a sprint. But I think if we know how to renew our spirits, if we have good fellowship and people around us, I think that the way we feel about people and children can grow over time, and we can do this for a very long time.
Yes, we
take care of ourselves. Yeah, take care of ourselves.
Yeah, community is important to that. Beth, I so appreciate you. If people want to get a hold of you or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Oh, I know. I married a cute boy at the right time, but really complicated last name. So if they can spell Guckenberger, they can find me on all the social media platforms. Also, of course, at Back to Back and Trauma Free World, we have lots of content there that they can find. And then I think I have some content still on our website, recklessfaith.com.
You do. You do. And I will say, you talked about the whether somebody is your porch person, your front yard person. That's in Throw the First Punch. Your book,
Yes.
Throw the First Punch, which I have given to some adolescents who, because sometimes kids from trauma get confused.
Yes.
And they think everybody's in their house. So I've given that for them to read that chapter, and then they end up reading the whole thing. And I will say the other, I mean, I love all your books. Warrior of Eden. If you are a woman, or if you're a man who has a relationship with a woman, or if you're a man who engaged with women ever,
if you're a man who was born of a woman. Yeah, I'm just kidding. Pretty much all of you.
That's what I'm saying. Warrior of Eden could be such a controversial topic. The tagline is how curiosity and questions lead to understanding God's call for women. And I've told you this. It was so funny because when you gave me the book, I kept texting you what I loved in the book. And then finally I went, oh, I'm sorry. You wrote the book. You know that this is in here. It is such a kind and pastoral approach that you take, and biblically based. So that's another way. But Beth, thank you so much. I appreciate you for who you are. I'm thankful for your friendship. And we're going to have lunch in an hour and 6 minutes. So I'll see you then. But bless you for being on here. And please look up Beth and follow her and do all the things. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my joy, Kim. Thanks for having me.